This is my development log for AINT254, and I'll be going through the development of this project from start to finish. Here we can see the first idea that I had, which is based on a chef character that I got out of a Kinder Egg. The idea was that you would be a waiter or someone carrying a tray, running along this little corridor with the aim of keeping all of these items on your tray. As you can see, the score in the top left corner is based on how many items are remaining on the tray. The character can strafe left and right and move the tray with their mouse. The character's speed increases slowly over time to add some challenge there. I was thinking about adding some different routes, as you can see the ramp on the left there. Currently, sometimes when the objects spawn, they do fly off like that, which isn't a known bug. And here's an example of me taking an alternate path. Currently the level just ends when you get to the end. So this is a code fix I did very early on. So initially I had the player movement controlled by setting the position using a vector 3 and using the velocity, but I had this all in update. I changed this to fixed update and an add force function instead, which works much better and the physics was much more reliable. This is showing off a bug where sometimes when you reset the player, the board doesn't reset. So if you left the board in a tricky position, you wouldn't be able to keep any items on no matter. And you would start with a score of 0. This was a very simple fix. Just find the tray in the scene and set the rotation to a new quaternion of 0, 0, 0, 0 at the start when you reset. And here is the fixed code in action. This is an introduction to the waypoint system that I implemented after some feedback at sessions. People felt that having a set course would be more effective as the player would be purely focused on moving the tray around. This is an early prototype of that system. And here's some code for the waypoint system. So you've got a speed and there's an array of checkpoints that the player is going to try and reach. There's also a little threshold, so as the player gets closer to the checkpoint, you can determine how soon it is they pick the next one. So to begin with, the target position of the player is set to the current checkpoint position. Current target checkpoint position. And an update. If the distance from the player to the next checkpoint is less than the waypoint threshold, then the next checkpoint is set, and the player will look towards and move towards the next one. Here we can see a demo of the finished waypoint project, or at least a finalized version of the movement. You can see that there's lots of different object types. The bouncy red balls are hard to control, the metal is heavier and slides less, and the ice is very slippery. The player's speed is quite low at the moment, but the plan was to increase the speed gradually as you went around the course. At around this point I didn't enjoy developing the project I was working on before, so I gave myself the task of taking a weekend and trying to develop a prototype that I enjoyed more, and I thought I would enjoy developing more through to the end of the project. This is what I came up with. So I tried to maintain some of the same mechanics, so the tilting tray, but now it's a static labyrinth, kind of like the old wooden board games, where you have to try and guide a marble through the course to the end, all the while avoiding pits. There's a timer, so can be some competition for high scores, who can get around the course the fastest and stuff like that. So this was the prototype that I made in the weekend, and I was already much happier with this than I was with the old project, so I decided to continue developing this one from here. So this is an intro to the color mixing mechanic I was planning on adding. So as you can see, the player did not manage to go through the purple exit, but you can take on colors from the blue and from the red. And when you mix blue and red, you make purple. So now that the player is the same color as the goal, you can leave and complete the level. This is some code for the color lerp. Basically, I am setting the value of 0 on the lerp to red and the 1 on the lerp to blue. And when the player mixes the two, the color is being set to 0.5, so a midpoint between red and blue. In this case, you can see the add blue script. If it's already blue, then it just stays as blue. But if it's red, then the current color lerp.value is set to 0.5. And the same for the red. So this is what happens when the player hits the pit. And this is also showing off the code that transitions the pit color from black to red as the player gets closer. This was a script I found and edited. So basically there is a max distance which I've got set to 0.5, and while the player is less than 0.5 distance away from the pit, their distance is placed on a that distance is mapped to a value between 0 and 1 in order to calculate the lerp value of the color of the pit. I thought this was a nice effect. And here is a more up-to-date version of the prototype. As you can hear, I've added sounds here. You might be able to hear that I have pitch shifted the wood hit sound every time the player hits a wall to add some variation and avoid repetition. The rolling sound also gets quieter as the speed of the player gets closer to 0. This makes the player feel as though what they're rolling around is a real object with some weight. Here I've added some post-processing to the camera and some textures to the board just to make it feel even more like the board game that I was going for. I've added a slight sepia border to the theme, as well as the depth of field to the background, which makes the player focus on the board in front of them much more and sets the mood much better. Here's a little UI test with the new title screen, and in the top left you can see the new timer that I've added with the new font. there you can see a little +10 pop up on the side because you get an extra 10 seconds added to the timer if you fall in a pit, which, as you can see, are now actual pits, indentations in the board. There's a wrong colour pop-up you can see because the player had not mixed themselves to the correct colour before trying to enter the exit hole. Having the pits as actual pits makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot more intuitive. I realised while testing this level that it was quite difficult and quite long to be the only level, so I will add some more levels to ease the player into the mechanics that they will need to use for the game. And coming up here we can see the new complete level screen with the high score. So this is some code for the game event system I've wrote with scriptable objects. So the game event here you can see has a raise function which will go through each of its listeners and raise their event. It also has the register and unregister listener functions. And in the listener itself, we can see that it has an event that it's listening for. On enable and disable is where the register and unregister happens. And when the event is raised, it has a response function as the event, which will invoke. To see that in use, here we can see some of the game events I've got in my scene, like player death, for example. If we find the player, we can see that player death is listened out for, and when player death is heard, it will destroy the player. Now, to see where player death is raised, we can look at one of the pits and see that it has player death as an event which it can raise from within the contact pit script. The reason I'm using events is because you can also listen to them from multiple places. So here in this case, the canvas is also listening for the player death, at which point it will add time to the timer. So this is showing off the level select screen which I've put together. So as you hover over the buttons, you get a little preview of the level which you can choose with a little description. If you just start the game, it automatically starts the game at level 1. But if you want to start at a later level, you can do that. As you can probably hear, I've also added music into this iteration of the game. So this clip is designed to show the transition I've put together between the levels, where one slides out and the next slides in. And here is a run through of all the levels I've got so far. So this first one is intended to just teach the player the tilting controls of the board with no obstacles. This one is designed to introduce pits to the player and the threats. This one introduces the colour mixing in a level with no threats, so it's easier to get used to. The same blue and red colour mixing. And finally the two are put together with the colour mixing in a level with the pits. This level is still quite tricky compared to the others, so given more time I would like to put an intermediary level between the previous one and this one. So that's that for this development video. If you would like to see the game run through without the commentary, there will be a link in the description of this YouTube video. Thank you.